will speak a little more about Congress when, as we expect, Brad Sherman will be joining us, and when I introduce him, we'll relate to more. Now, as I said, we have our special guest, some of you may have met when Garo Palyan was here in 2016. She was acting as his chief of staff, and she is now based in Stanford. I will read you her short bio, even though it's in the program, and you just have to hear from her. That will do the rest of the story. Tamar Nalci received her bachelor's degree in Western Languages and Literature at Yıldız Technical University and continued master's program in Cultural Studies at Istanbul Bilgi University. At the same time, she had worked as an assistant in Aras Publishing and as a volunteer reporter in Agos Weekly. After her graduation, she had for years worked in Anadolu Kültür as a coordinator of projects on arts and cultural dialogue with Armenia and on cultural diversity in Turkey. In 2015, she became the advisor to Garo Palyan, the chief of staff, HDP deputy in Turkish Assembly. Moving to Stanford in 2018, she continues to work on civil society projects and human rights defense in Turkey. Please give a warm welcome to Tamar Nalci.
I would like to thank the organization of Istanbul Armenians for organizing this meaningful commemoration and for having me here, and thank you for coming. Hrant Dink was assassinated 13 years ago today, and we all know that it was a murder which had been planned for years. A few months after Hrant Dink was murdered, the first trial began in July 2007 and lasted for 5 years. The trial, in which only the assassin and a part of planners were tried, was closed with a scandalous verdict. They expected us to believe that Hrant Dink was solely the target of a racist nationalist campaign, and there was no other state-orchestrated organization behind this murder. During these 5 years, as the Friends of Hrant organization, we continuously called upon state officials to give us the big brothers. Try those who are responsible, they must be brought to justice for this murder. Try the public officials. The case where public officials were tried was reopened 9 years after the murder. And it was the second part of the same horrid theater. The last hearing of the second part took place last November, and it was the 100th hearing. Throughout these 100 hearings, among the documents exceeding 500 folders, we listened how the murder occurred out of intentional negligence, how it was planned, and how evidences were obfuscated. In the trial of public officials, we are still hearing the witnesses. Yes, 13 years after the murder, we are still hearing the witnesses. Although the assassin was punished, unfortunately, people who gave the order have not yet been tried for 13 years. To solve this assassination could have casted light on the future of Turkey, but instead, tragically, new crimes have been committed. Another assassination took place in November 2015 in Diyarbakır, Diklalengert. The Kurdish lawyer, the president of Diyarbakır Bar Association, Tahir Elçi, was murdered beside the four-legged minaret while he was giving a press statement against violence also affecting the cultural heritage of the city. Has justice been served in the Tahir Elçi case? No. Instead of solving Tahir Elçi's assassination, last year a court ruled a lawsuit against the Diyarbakır Bar Association, who has followed Elçi's case, over their statement about the Armenian genocide, and charging them with inciting the public to enmity and hatred under the Article 201 of Turkish Penal Code, on which Hrant Dink had also been tried. A verdict recently reached eased us a little bit. As you all know, Sevak Şahin Balıkçı, who was of my age, a Bol Sahai, was murdered during his compulsory military service in 2011. Although it was certain that Sevak was deliberately murdered in the bill of indictment, the legal process was prolonged, with dirty tricks such as spoliation of evidence and false testimonies. 9 years after the assassination, finally on January 13, the murderer was sentenced to 17 years in prison. For sure, this verdict would never bring Sevak back. At least the expected justice for Sevak was served to some extent. Soon after Dink's assassination, Erdogan, the prime minister at the time and today's president, said that they would not let this case disappear in the dark corridors of Ankara. Against this statement, the case disappeared repeatedly in those corridors and it was even buried there. All power holders preferred to accuse each other of this murder. However, it was clear that this murder was a murder of a collective consensus. At least who are in this hall today know from the bottom of your hearts that Turkey's history is filled with many collective consensus murders. To find the justice is becoming increasingly difficult in today's Turkey. What kind of Turkey are we living in today? How are we struggling for justice? As of December 2019, 199 journalists imprisoned in Turkey. Thousands of websites are banned, including Wikipedia, which was restored again just 3 days ago, and especially Kurdish news agencies. Many lawyers who are especially members of Istanbul and Diyarbakır Bar Associations, many scholars, they were forced to defend themselves in courtrooms. Moreover, a research about the rule of law shows us the current situation of Turkey, and according to this research, Turkey is in the lowest place among Eastern Europe and Central Asia countries. Unfortunately, politicians are in prison, like Selahattin Demirtas, the former co-chair of HDP, is in jail for more than 3 years. Human rights defenders like Turkish philanthropist Osman Kavala, who has been in jail for more than 2 years, they are under pressure today. It is worth noting that Osman Kavala was among 20-30 people who did not leave Hrant Dink alone, while he had been tried after publishing an article about Sabiha Gökçen in Agos in 2004. Unfortunately, already the debatable practice of state of law in Turkey is rapidly losing its last hinges, whereas the rule of law is fading. Arbitrariness, intimidation, and pressure campaigns have become routine. In 2008, in the first commemoration of Hrant Dink, we asked this question: can fear make you forget? Even within the framework of this panorama of Turkey, which I tried to explain, the answer is still no. We did not forget. Maybe hundreds of thousands of people at Hrant Dink's funeral has never come together again. Nonetheless, thousands of people gathered to commemorate him on January 19 in front of the Agos newspaper's former building, which is converted today into 23.5 Hrant Dink site of memory. If you come to Istanbul, please visit Hrant Dink site of memory. I was 21 when Hrant Dink was murdered. And as an Armenian woman from Turkey, I had never taken to the streets until that day. On that very day, a crowd gathered spontaneously in Taksim Square, and we started to walk to Agos newspaper with the candles in our hands, and some of us started to sing Sargelin. And for the first time in my life, I sang an Armenian song in the streets, and it was a kind of lament. Am I scared? Yes. I was scared because I was thinking this is not the first loss and this won't be the last. I was very afraid of losing my loved ones. Our ancestors survived the genocide, our parents witnessed so many dark days, but they didn't give up. So I thought, okay, now it's our turn. And the challenge of my generation has started since it was the first crime entirely committed in front of my eyes. And despite all these fears, many young people those days who took to the streets did not enter their house again. The murder of Hrant Dink was a breaking point in our lives. Perhaps the intense emotions we experienced that day brought us here to this day. Some of us decided to become journalists, scholars, some of us worked in NGOs or human rights associations. Yes, we are a bunch of people, but knowing that there are people trying to preserve the legacy of Hrant Dink somewhere, knowing that there are people trying to show that courage, even if it's just small bit of Hrant Dink's courage. This appeases the fears that I felt on January 19, 2007. One thing I have learned during this 13 years of struggle was that it is always good to be in solidarity and struggle shoulder to shoulder. The main factor that enabled this vigilance to continue for so many years was, of course, to know that we are not alone. In an article I have read recently, it was saying, quote, "Hope is not sitting and hoping for the best, it's the enthusiasm we need to take action," unquote. That enthusiasm exists in Turkey today, and we are not silent, and we are still taking actions against injustice. Yes, it's difficult, but we do. Knowing that you are gathering here every year, commemorating Hrant Dink all over the world, is a sign that Hrant Dink and his legacy will never be forgotten and will pass down for generations. In his message to commemorate Hrant Dink, Osman Kavala wrote, quote, "Commemorating Hrant shows us how easily a person can do evil to his fellows, citizens and humans, shows us this painful reality. But thinking about Hrant gives us more power to stand up, to endure what we have lived, and hope persistently." Yes, we need to hope persistently. Այվետք է համարորեն հուսադրենք ուզեմ վերջացնել իմ խոսքերը հայերենով մենք պիտի շարունակենք Hrant Dinki համար արդարություն պահանջելու անշուշտ եւ պիտի շարունակենք միշտ հադը հետևելու այս տարեսին որ ամիջնալու համար ուշ չէ քանի որ ուզենք հավատալ թե արդարությունը պիտի շահի եւ փուն հանցավորները անպայման պիտի պատժվի նորմը մինչեւ որ այդ օրը կա մենք ունենք եւ պիտի բնանք եւ պիտի շարունակենք պայքարելու բոլոր այս անարդարություններով թեմ Աստված իրեն հոգին ուսավորե շնորհակալություն